Hey, everybody, we're coming to you live from the floor for day 3 of Rapid 2023. How are you doing today, Laura?
I'm doing good. I'm very tired today. Yes, I think I've just about adjusted to the sleep over here and the time. Just I'm about to go home, which is great, but it's been a really great week. I'm very happy to be here. How about you? How are you feeling?
Great. Lots of wonderful collisions with friends and friends I hadn't met yet until this week. And the annual Rapid karaoke party last night, which I'm recovering from. But all in all, I feel like this has been a great show and a show to remember for me.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about, isn't it? I think seeing all the same faces every year, but then also getting to meet a bunch of new ones and singing your favorite songs on karaoke. What else is
exactly
Rapid
right.
TCT for?
Well, you'll love that we were singing Bohemian Rhapsody, which
Nice.
is a song from your part of the world. So I am just so excited to be here on this last day, and there's still so many people walking around and visiting the booths and the exhibits, and also, of course, the main stage is hopping with some pretty good talent.
Yeah, and I know that, so from my side, so Rapid plus TCT, a TCT group hosts their conference, which is happening downstairs at the moment.
Yep.
That's been absolutely packed this week. I hear some of the aerospace sessions, standing room only, so it's been a really, really exciting week, and I think the energy has just remained really high.
I've heard the same, and the other thing I've seen is I'm starting to see a younger set of people, new faces, which is always exciting. And, when you have that enthusiasm for an industry that is at the top of the age range and also at the bottom, I think that's an industry that's built to last. So really excited to have seen that and incorporating all those new ideas and all those new faces into the community. And that's what this conference has always been about.
Absolutely. I think that's the way we get new ideas into the industry, new kinds of applications, and some of the organizations that I know we're going to chat about today. I mean, they've been really, really instrumental in making sure that happens and getting new people into this industry, and it's just so great to see.
I agree with that. And some of the talks were particularly inspiring on the main stage.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about, Kevin Zinger of Divergent 3D. His vision for an additive ecosystem that for the automotive sector that can be repurposed for other industry sectors is super inspiring to me, and I feel like that's the way things are going to go, and I'm expecting from that discussion a lot more ideas and a lot more conversation in the community about that.
Well, that's the thing. I think applications like that, they really spark the imagination, and there's been a few this week actually that I think have done that too, but particularly that everybody's fascinated by that story, but it's very real too. It's not just a concept, it's happening, and I think that's only going to inspire further things into the future.
Absolutely. So what stood out for you? I mean, I mentioned the Divergent conversation. What stood out for you?
So this week, I mean, we've been busy on this booth an awful lot this week, so I've not had chance. I always say every year, okay, I'm going to book out 20 minutes just to wander around the show floor. Of course, I've not actually done that. But from just the conversations that I've been having, and we've been here with TCT Magazine. Our job is to report on all the biggest news coming out of the event this week. And honestly, there has been so much news. But I think what's been really nice to see is that usually we come to a huge trade show like this and we see new 3D printers launched on just about every corner. This year, there's been an awful lot of launches, but I think they've been so much more considered. They've been all about building out the additive ecosystem, whether it's software launches to, help streamline the whole process from design all the way to post-processing, whether it's been new materials, things like that, post-processing technologies, all of these really important bits of the value chain that need extra attention if we're ever going to get additive manufacturing into these real production environments. That's been really important to see this week, and I think that's taken over a lot of the news coverage. What about you?
Yes, I would concur with that we're starting to see different aspects of it. Isn't just about the making of the additive part, but it's all the stuff that comes before and all the stuff that comes after.
Absolutely.
From, metrology and even, different robotic systems and motion controls, which, depending on who you are, motion controls are super sexy, but Most people are not. We're just seeing a lot of these ideas merging and integrating in ways that I don't think we've seen in a long time.
Absolutely.
And I would say also there was a big push earlier in the week. I know that the AM Green Trade Association, which is the sustainability mouthpiece for the industry, had its second annual meeting, and they're up to about 50 members now. So you're starting to see, different groups emerge that are, really trying to reshape the way we talk about additive and the value proposition that additive has for the nation. So that's been a tremendous, conversation to see happening.
Absolutely, particularly on sustainability. I think what's been great about something like the AMGTA is it's forcing the industry to be very transparent about sustainability claims. It's very easy to say that additive manufacturing is more sustainable because, yes, we're not machining material away from a big block of metal, and theoretically we can make things closer to the point of need, but having that data to back it up and having companies now take these life cycle analysis research papers and really just push that out into the world, it's making sure that we're looking at additive for the right reasons and knowing where the holes are and where we can be more sustainable and make better choices.
You are absolutely right, Laura. I mean, that is part of what that meeting was about. It was about sharing some of their sustainability data, how they had collected it, and just being very open and transparent about what is it really happening, not greenwashing.
Yeah.
So, we had a couple of people on an earlier game day this week talking about that specifically. This is really hard work. It's yeoman's work. It's not exciting sometimes. It's exciting to certain people, but I think that if additive wants to make a claim about being a more sustainable option, it has to prove it at the foundational level. And one other note that, TCT is a global organization, and the Rapid group is really focused on America here, but at that sustainability world, you have a lot more global players, and especially at the AMGT. It was such a diverse group of nations that were represented in that room. And when you talk about sustainability, I'm just going to say it, I think that the Danes and, the Germans and, the Europeans in general and others have a lot more on the Americans focusing on that. So I think we're learning and we're collaborating with them to get it right. So, and I think TCT is a big part of that.
I think you're right, and I think it's about seeing how different regions really just have different focuses on that sort of thing, and individual companies too. You talk to some companies, and it's a big part of what they're looking for when they come to look at new additive technologies. They're thinking about sustainability, or some of them are thinking about, okay, if I choose this technology, how sustainable is it? And they're making business decisions based on that. It's a huge factor now, and like you say, it's not always the most exciting thing to talk about, but it is super important. However, I do want to talk about some exciting things that we have seen this week.
I want to hear this, yes, because I've got one too, but you go first.
So I think that one thing that's become very, very clear is that in additive manufacturing, we all know the benefits of the technology. We all know what's great about it. We all know the downsides too. But I think what's important about coming to a show like this and seeing new faces coming through is making sure that message gets out there to people that maybe are not in the additive industry and perhaps they don't know about the benefits of the technology or how it fits into their business. Now, the Wilson ball that we've had right here on this desk this week.
So cool.
Everybody's excited about it. Everybody wants to come and have a go. I've not tried because I would fail miserably, and I'm not doing that in front of people. But everybody has been talking about it, and when we had the whole team on here just a few days ago, everybody from the design stage to the post-processing stage to to the actual printing portion, everybody had similar comments about how it's the first thing that their family members and their friends have been very interested in when it comes to 3D printing. And while that ball, okay, it's not necessarily being used right now in the game, it's an incredible application to show the kinds of things that can be achieved with 3D printing. When you look at the design choices that have been made there, the fact that you can save material, really reduce those development costs. And I think having something like that out in the public domain and really just sparking that interest can only then cause people to ask more questions about, okay, how can I use that then? Or how can I use additive in my business?
Well, and think about the young child who gets to see that additively made ball at some point and start to imagine the next generation of wheels for the Mars rover or whatever it could be.
Absolutely.
You just don't know how that's going to work. So that was the one I was going to share. I really was inspired by that. There are also a lot of partnerships that were announced around. I'm not going to name those, but really we should be proud of the collaborative nature
Absolutely.
of the industry. It's still collaborative after all these years, even as it's gotten more competitive. I still see a level of collaboration that you don't see. It's not typical in other industries.
And I think there needs to be, this industry, as we all know here today, it's not a new industry, but maybe to those outside still think it could be quite new. But we kind of need to all learn from each other so we don't keep reinventing the wheel. We need to, as we talked about earlier, those different parts of the value chain. All these things need to come together in order to make it work. We know it's not just about just a machine. It's about everything else that comes around it. So that collaboration, having these different minds all come together on these applications is just incredibly important.
It really is. And we were talking at the break about what are some of those things that are being focused on here. And you mentioned, I know in our platform here, the skills gap was talked about deeply, and what America Makes and others are doing to take care of that. And then the importance of data. I don't know how many different panels we're exploring data generated at the AM level, and how incredibly important it is to manage that. And as you suggested, the software.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. I think, additive is an inherently digital process, but, the minute we take something out of a machine, if we're not collecting that data and then using it to learn from and to push things forward, then it's no longer a digital process. So it's been great this week to talk to organizations like SAE International, who've talked an awful lot about data and the importance of that as well in building these certification standards, frameworks, things like that. All these kinds of things that are going into maturing this industry for end-use applications. It's been really nice to hear from people that are actually doing the work with that.
I agree, and so much discussion on qualifications and different ways to approach that regime. Certainly standards on the SAE side, and then certifications, and all three of those things are different. And I think they get lumped in together.
Absolutely.
But it's okay that they do. But when you're getting down to the nitty-gritty, you really do have to pull that apart. And those conversations were being had here, and a lot of meetings around it. And I think that, kind of getting that right, whether it's a qualification for a material or a certification, credentialing on the skills side, and then, of course, the standards for materials and whatnot. I think getting that right is critical to it, say, accelerating the adoption of this technology broadly.
And even just that applications development too. I mean, we had Pepsi over here yesterday, and they were talking about what they're doing with additive manufacturing, and it's not for end-use products yet. It's all part of their manufacturing process. But, having that assurance that they can use that, in a huge organization like that, it's you do need that in order to explore these technologies. And I think application discovery is quite a difficult thing really for additive. It's not always obvious where it fits into your business, but seeing all these different examples here this week, there's so many places it can go into, and it's been great to hear from big organizations like that are really finding them.
I agree with what you said, and last year we had a panel on the industrialization of AM. And this year we had a panel on practical AM that I happen to lead. So just had a really diverse group of folks on the panel that talked about, what are the big challenges to get the client to adopt it? Because, we're manufacturers, we make things. We also make equipment that makes things. We make materials that make things. And at the end, you have a client. And if that client doesn't understand how the technology can be demonstrated and used in their business, they're not going to ask you about it. So we're still at that place where we're explaining this, and we are, attempting to push it forward, not just with technology, but also the story and the narrative around that. One of the big sets of narratives that have been happening is the idea of data, not on the machine level, which of course the in situ and process monitoring, the digital thread, all of that is critical to taking us to the next step and making sure it's secure. But data on the business side of the equation, when I think of data, because I'm not an engineer, for me it's what sales are there. You know, what kind of equipment is being purchased? Where is that equipment being purchased? And where is it being deployed? And at what scale?
Yes.
And what is it making?
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, America Makes, we're working with TCT and some other partners to really tackle that issue and start to understand where is this being deployed, so we can understand the industry itself and how it's growing in different ways. And I will be talking with Terry Wallers later today, and hopefully get some insights on that.
And it's maximizing that capacity too. I mean, we've all been to facilities and seen those machines that have been installed and they're just not being used to their full potential. You know, it's digging into why is that, and that does fall into application discovery too, and coming to places like this and seeing examples and case studies on the show floor of how to really use additive to its true potential. And I know you've been working with some incredible organizations, and you know, with really growing this ecosystem of partners and organizations. I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. Yeah, we started with the AMGTA, and I'd say there are other organizations that have been emerging as a subset in the additive space. And one I'm going to talk about is the Women in 3D Printing, because they're really focused on inclusion and diversity issues as well as workforce development.
Yes.
But how that happens in the context of more women in this area. And we engaged in a very nice announcement with them last night, focusing on America Makes, supporting them to do chapter engagements. It's all volunteer organization. And so how could America Makes support those chapters to spread their mission a little bit more quickly and work with young women and put additive at the forefront. So we're excited about that, and hopefully this is the beginning of something very special that we can continue. I'd say another organization I would talk to is, you know, the AM Coalition was founded in 2020, and the AM Coalition is having their first ever in-person day on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. in 2 weeks. And I'm sharing that because it's a milestone. The industry is coming together to do that kind of advocacy at that level. And that, to me, is a harbinger of an industry that is maturing and starting to recognize it needs to come together to share that narrative at a higher level of government. So. Oh,
absolutely. And I think we saw this sort of start to happen last year. I think it was around Rapid 2022 with the AM Forward initiative that was announced, and lots of huge companies that got on board that. And I think what we're waiting on now to see is how that trickles down, because the idea of AM Forward was to kind of push additive manufacturing into supply chains with smaller businesses, smaller manufacturers, and that is what it's ultimately all about. And I love seeing that at shows like this and seeing smaller companies come in and discovering additive for the first time and how it fits in. But I'm very keen to see how initiatives like this are going to move the industry forward and see some of the results from that too.
I like that you added the AM Forward conversation, because it really raised the awareness at a presidential level of what is necessary to reshore and bring back, business and different kinds of manufacturing. It sort of stimulated the fact that when we do that reshoring, we ought to do it with advanced technologies. And so that executive order ended up not just being about AM at some level. It ended up being about how do we grow the next generation of suppliers that can do these advanced technologies, that can build the next level of vehicles, whether they're defense or missile systems or, spaceships, airplanes. It doesn't really matter what that product is. And so it really put that focus on supplier development at the small business level. And we were forced to really be honest with ourselves about the level of sophistication that our supply chain has or doesn't have. And so that was really exciting to me. And it also leaned us in hard on the idea of maybe there's some modernization that needs to occur.
Oh, yeah.
And across our manufacturing supply base. And in fact, we've been involved, and there have been conversations all week about the idea of modernizing the castings and forgings industry in the United States.
I think that's really important you bring that up, because I think sometimes we think of additive as a bit of a separate technology, and really it is about how does it fit into those more traditional processes. And I've seen great examples of some huge parts on the show floor this week have been used in applications in casting, in forging, those types of things. But just on what you were saying there about, the really digitizing these supply chains, I think that in the past few years we've all heard about these supply chain disruptions that we've been through. People can't get hold of cars and PlayStations and things like that, and it's of course it's starting to come back now. There's a lot of conversation around additives role in that and using it as a stopgap technology, as a replacement technology. It's great to see that conversation didn't just kind of happen as another bit of a hype wave. It's actually managed to continue, and we're getting more mature conversations now about how does that actually work, talking to the real suppliers, not just the machine vendors, talking to people that need to be having those conversations and asking the right questions. It's great to see the industry maturing in that way.
I love what you said about that, and in fact it makes me think of the CHIPS Act that was recently passed and how now we're trying to implement the CHIPS Act. And as I think about that, I think that the CHIPS Act was about making sure we had microchips for now with the current technology that we know how to make. But it was also very much about innovating.
Yes.
The way those chips are made and the capabilities in our nation. And we saw how difficult that was. And we're throwing a whole lot of money at that. And I know that additive isn't the only industry that will benefit from that boldness on the part of our government, but it is an important step that we be taking to always think about how can we do this differently.
Absolutely.
And what does is the ecosystem in place to make it work? One thing I want to share is that while that chip investment is going to happen in one place, obviously the follow-on effects are pretty significant. But what we're also seeing in the ecosystem as it relates to additive is we're starting to see a lot more of this regional approach where, manufacturing occurs at the regional level. It occurs in places. It's people. And there are some places that do manufacturing well, some places that don't have as much. And at America Makes, I know we're focused on how to bring this alignment of the national strategy down at that regional, local level where the activity is actually occurring and make it exciting, because we get to come here and hang out and have these amazing visionary conversations. And then we have to go back to home, to a place, and then go try to make it happen. So I feel that that's happening, and I want to see more, and I'm super excited that this conference continues to be here and it continues to grow year over year. The sophistication of the exhibits, the level of dialogue that we're able to have just keeps growing. So, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you and share this with our audience, whoever's out there listening.
Let's make it happen.
All right. See you next year.
You too.